Hey, what's up guys? It's Talon. Today I'm going to be making a Wild Rift video ranking the rules from easiest to hardest to play. And what I really mean by this is easiest and hardest to master. So overall, what are all the different types of things that you kind of have to have in these roles, and what does it take to really master these roles? Now, I've obviously not mastered any of these roles completely, so I'm more referring to what it takes to kind of get to the high elo grandmaster challenger level and how it feels to play these roles and what I think is the most difficult to play in high elo ranked games. So getting into the first one, I think that the easiest role to master overall in Wild Rift is ADC. Now, this does not mean ADC is difficult, and I want to make that very clear that none of these roles I'm saying are necessarily easy to play, or that just because you play a role I consider overall easier, that you're worse at the game. It's more ADC has a very specific skill set that is very difficult to master, but is very one-dimensional in the sense that ADC is very much focused on mechanics and micro. You have to have good positioning, good spacing, good awareness of who can and can't kill you, and these things are all very difficult. Having the quick reactions, all of that type of thing, those types of things, they are very difficult, and I think it is very, very difficult to master this role, just like it is any role. However, that said, you do not need as much awareness overall of the game, of the map, of what's going on around you, because your focus is really just dealing damage in team fights, getting yourself gold, just these pretty straightforward things, and the hard part comes from the mechanical sense of the champion. But when you're talking about the macro, you kind of just farm up and then rotate to team fights when there's an objective up or whatever. So for that reason, even though ADC is very difficult in terms of mechanics, because of the macro required in comparison to other roles, I am going to have it overall at the easiest role in Wild Rift to master. Okay guys, so next up we have support as the second easiest role to master in Wild Rift. And it's kind of the opposite for support compared to ADC, where the mechanics on these champs are very, very easy in a lot of ways. Lulu, Yumi, a lot of these enchanters, a lot of the tanks even are pretty straightforward and pretty easy to play. They're just very easy mechanically speaking. You don't have a ton of skill shots. You don't have a ton of spacing required. You kind of just position behind as an enchanter and then heal people, or as a tank you just go all in, So for this reason, the mechanics of the champs aren't super difficult. But where it does become more difficult than ADC, in my opinion, is the knowledge and the macro required to play this role at a really high level. If you're a really good support player, you understand which lanes need you to roam to them, when you should be roaming, when it's okay to leave your ADC alone. All of these types of things are difficult to understand, and really having overall game knowledge is why I do consider it to be a bit more difficult than support, or than ADC rather. But because of the champions being kind of easy to play overall, I do consider it to not be too difficult, so I put it overall at number 4. Okay guys, so at number 3 we actually have jungle, which I think some may be surprised by, but in my opinion jungle is a bit more straightforward than it may seem. It's really a role that's very heavily focused on farming and focused on efficiency, and I feel like once you really learn how to be efficient, it is actually not as difficult as it may seem. Additionally, the champions in the role aren't quite as difficult, I would say, as the ones on the higher end of the difficulty list in this role, or in this video. But where it does become difficult is having to have understanding of enemy jungler pathing so that you can invade them, or you can counter gank, or you can gank when they're not there. Understanding overall objective control, as well as when to start objectives, and having the responsibility of kind of the objectives overall. These are some of the more difficult parts of jungle. And then you also have to understand lane matchups, so you know who to gank, when to gank, which lanes to path towards, these types of things. So I do consider the role to be quite difficult to master. However, overall, once you get to a high level of it, it becomes pretty telegraphed as to what you want to do in terms of you farm and then you gank, and you just kind of, it's pretty I don't know the word exactly, but it's a pretty linear thing that you have to do a lot of the times, and being creative is not always rewarded in jungle because of just how important it is to be farming and have really efficient gold. Additionally, you're not necessarily laning people, you're just kind of farming jungle camps. So for that reason, I do have it at number 3, which again may surprise some people. Okay guys, so this one was quite difficult for me to decide on, but overall I went with putting top lane as the second hardest role in Wild Rift, or the 4th easiest role to master. And the reason for this, that I think it is quite difficult, is because it's very much a 1v1. You're very punished if you do make mistakes in this lane. The wave management is very important. Understanding waves, understanding how to set up your wave for a dive versus setting it up just for a freeze so you don't get ganked, or all of these different types of things. I do think overall is quite difficult. Additionally, a lot of the champions are pretty hard in the role. I would say champions like Fiora, Riven, Camille, Aurelia. I'm probably missing some others, but a lot of them are pretty difficult in top lane. And then the overall mind games that you kind of have to play with your opponent in lane, punishing them for going for last hits, faking like you're going to go for a last hit, then trading, understanding when to trade, all these types of things. And then additionally, understanding when to rotate versus split push. The fact that you can be playing a champion like a Malphite who really wants to team fight, but then you need to prevent an enemy split pusher, or you're the split pusher. Just understanding when you should be on the side lanes versus team fighting, managing your wave to help you do that. Just overall, all of this stuff does make top lane quite hard in my opinion. So I have it listed as the second hardest role to master in Wild Rift. And then lastly, guys, the most difficult role in Wild Rift, in my opinion, is going to be mid lane. And a lot of the same reasons to top lane apply in terms of the laning, where you have to kind of mind game your opponent. You have to understand laning very well, wave management, all of these same types of things. But then you also have the similar responsibilities of a jungler, understanding when to roam, understanding other lane matchups, playing around the enemy jungler's rotations, rotating with your jungler, all of these things. So you kind of have a mix of top lane and mid lane, or rather top lane and jungle. And then additionally, you have quite difficult champions in this role, and you have so many different types of champions. So you have the really difficult assassins like the Akali, Zed, Katarina, you know, these really difficult high mechanical champions. But then you can also have the tanks like Galio, like Gragas, these types of champs in mid lane. You could have the mages like Orianna, Vex, Annie, whatever types of mages. You have the ADCs, even like the Lucians, the Akshans. So there's just so many different types of champions that require different skill sets to play. And then again, the fact that you kind of have to understand both the laning aspect of similar to top lane, but then also the rotational aspect of jungle, just makes it overall, in my opinion, the most difficult role in Wild Rift. So yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts on my ranking. I am really like not too sure about how confident I am in these rankings. I definitely think there's a lot of debate that could be had. And again, I want to mention, it really depends on what you think is more difficult. I've never been a big fan of having these conversations, because to me, it feels like sometimes people are like doing these things to like feed their ego of like their role is harder or easier or whatever. And for me, it's more just, I want to have a conversation about what makes your guys' roles difficult and what you think people maybe don't think about when they're thinking about what's hard or easy about your roles. Again, like even if ADC I had as the easiest role, that doesn't mean that it's an easy role to play. There's still a lot of thought that is required to play the role, and the mechanics of that role are so difficult. Not being able to get caught out, like you're always targeted in that role, for example. But then there's some roles like mid lane which just kind of have all of these different responsibilities. So that's kind of why I value some of those roles higher. But I definitely think there's a lot of debate to be had. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.